Do you have children? Okay, so she's got children. I don't. We could be the same gender, the same age, the same race. We could live in the same zip code, and we could make the same household income, and by all these demographic standards, she and I would look the same on paper. But you know and I know that if you've got kids and I don't, we are going to be different in every meaningful way, in every fundamental way. So, again, my definition of diversity is any way that you can be different from me. So here's my list of diversity. Yours could be different. This is just Kelly science, okay? Here's some ways we can be different from one another. Gender, right? Men are different from women. And we all know this, and it really is true. There's obviously comedians who make their entire living riffing off of this, but it really is true. Women use something like 20,000 more words a day than men. It's true. My husband's like, for you, Kelly, it's like 60,000, right? And, just for what it's worth, I was telling my husband one day about my day, and apparently I was telling him it to him in excruciating detail, and he'd had enough, okay? And he goes like this to me. I'm like, what is that? Are you muting me? And he's like, I'm trying. So dudes, if you're in a relationship with a woman, don't do that, okay? You're just gonna sleep on the couch for 2 nights. Anyway, aside from the fact that women are more verbal than men, we're also more demonstrative. We're much more likely to hug and kiss and wear our hearts on our sleeves. And, it's pretty easy to understand where a woman's coming from. We're pretty open. What about religious differences? That's a way that we can be different from one another. How about political views? That's another way we can be different. Age and generational differences. There's no doubt that somebody who's a senior or a boomer is very different than someone who's Gen X or Gen Y. I totally loved the 555 thing last night. That was just absolutely awesome. The gay and lesbian market. Physical abilities, emotional abilities, mental abilities. What about even rural versus metro? I don't know about you, but I've done some gigs for like ag farmers, and that's a very different audience than, bankers in Manhattan. All right? Yeah, so we know there's all kinds of differences. Military, civilian, there's 2 totally different worlds. Obviously, race and ethnicity, and linguistically, and nativity. Foreign born versus US born. I absolutely loved it last night at the general session when Shep was going through the list of the countries. 31 countries. Give it up. 31 countries are here. We are the world. We are the children. Yeah, that's awesome. But think about that. If we have all these different countries, then it's not just linguistic and country of origin. It's also cultural things, but also core values. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about values. Core values reflect the real you. If you take that bottle of water when you're finished drinking it, that plastic bottle of water, and you throw it into a recycling bin, that tells me something about you. It tells me something about your values. It tells me maybe you care about the environment. You're trying to do your part. It's a small action, but it's incredibly reflective of what you believe. And let me tell you this, folks. Your values are what really matters, and your customers and your clients' values. I promise you this. If I can figure out what you value, I can figure out how to get into your wallet. That's a promise, because people spend money on what they care about. They spend money on what they value. So, if you're an environmentalist, that tells me something. What about going back to my children thing? A woman who homeschools her children is going to be very different than someone who does not. Or someone who's a vegan or a vegetarian. All of these are core values, and they speak strongly to the kind of person that you are. There's also, of course, diversity even within our industry. We have different types of speakers, right? We have motivational speakers, educational speakers, entertainers, trainers, and more. We've got different types of client organizations, from corporations, associations, and nonprofits and religious groups to different audience types. A group of insurance CEOs is going to be a very different type of audience than insurance agents. They're going to need very different takeaways. And suppliers, speaking bureaus, sponsors, industry leaders, we speak to so many different people. We have all these different constituencies that we have to satisfy, and we personally can't be like all of them. We've got to figure out how to market and sell to people not like us. So, how do you do that? It's about understanding someone's life. I will never know what it's like to be a guy. I don't yet know what it's like to be 80 years old. I don't know what it's like to be a mom. I don't know what it's like to be in the military. I don't know what it's like to be black, Hispanic, Asian, or Native American. I don't know what it's like to own a dog. These are things I don't know. But I promise you that that does not mean that I couldn't meaningfully connect with someone who is any of those things or has a dog, all right? So the way that you understand how to work with someone not like you is by understanding that what makes you you is your priorities, your values, the experiences that define you. That's what makes you you. And all of that translates to what your perspective is. And perspective is never wrong. Your perspective is never wrong. No one else's perspective is ever wrong either. Your perspective might be very different than her perspective. And I might respectfully disagree with your perspective, but I can't tell you that your perspective is wrong. It's like your opinion. You're entitled to any perspective you want. Your perspective is how you see the world. That's what perspective is. And everybody sees the world a little bit differently. To show you and demonstrate how different perspective can be, try this exercise sometime. When asked the exact same question, different people will answer it differently based on their perspective. When asked to name how Kennedy died, maturers and baby boomers will say a gunshot wound in Dallas, right? Gen X will say a plane crash near Martha's Vineyard. And Gen Y will say Kennedy who? No, that's not fair. That's just a little levity at the expense of the Gen Yers. Sorry. All right, try this one sometime. Who is Ron Howard? If you are of a certain age, Opie, right? If you're a baby boomer like me, you're likely to say Richie from Happy Days. And if you're Gen X or Gen Y, you are likely to say an award-winning director. And Ron Howard is all of these things. None of these are right or wrong. He's all of these things. They're all correct.